what books or people outside of the startup world have most improved your ability to invest, and maybe broadly speaking, just resource allocate?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. This is a very deep question that's going to have lots of answers. But at the end of the day, I think you have to work on your internal state until you are free of as many biases and conditioned responses as you can be, and it will improve every aspect of your life, including investing. And I am a bookworm, so I read an enormous amount. I was raised essentially in a library as a daycare center. And so I've just read so much that I don't even know where to start. But if you work on your internal state, one of the things you start realizing is, as an investor, emotions dominate. Investors are very emotional, even though we pretend to be very rational. For example, you'll decide in the first 5 minutes of a meeting, usually, whether you want to invest in the company or not. And if a company doesn't take your money in the first round, you get annoyed with them, or you feel like they crossed you, then you have to undo that emotional state. So when the second round comes along, you can still be a positive force and continue helping the company and maybe have a bite at the apple a second time. And these kinds of skills are extremely hard to build. They're not things you're going to build by reading one book and then you're like, aha. So I don't believe in the epiphany theory of self-development, where you read some book, you have an incredible epiphany, you read one phrase, you're like, okay, that's great, this changes my life, and then you scroll it down on a piece of paper and you keep looking at it, or you put it as a backdrop to your computer screen. Life doesn't work that way. What you kind of have to do is you have to build skills. And I think happiness is a skill, nutrition is a skill, diet is a skill, investing is a skill, self-awareness is a skill. And skills get built up over decades with feedback loops, and you just have to constantly keep working on it. So the books that have helped me a lot, I think there's a class of books that I would kind of put in the Stoicism category. And I know you've been a big advocate of these in the past, and I sort of discovered them independently, but they were very influential. So, Seneca and Marcus Aurelius both stand out. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius was absolutely life-changing for me, because it's the personal diary of the Emperor of Rome. And here's a guy who was probably the most powerful human being on earth at the time that he lived, and he was writing his own diary to himself, not expecting it to be published. And when you open this book, you realize he had all the same issues and all the same mental struggles, and he was trying to be a better person. And so right there, you figure out, okay, success and power don't improve your internal state. You still have to work on that. And so that class of books is very influential. I like to pay attention to what I consider the rational Buddhists. Because a lot of Buddhism is drowned in mysticism and Hinduism and sort of worship this guru or do this ritual. So I don't pay any attention to that. But I pay a lot of attention to what I consider rational Buddhists, where they can make the case very intelligently with reasoning along the way as to how you should train your mind to work or how you should observe your mind. Sam Harris, who you mentioned earlier, is great. Jiddu Krishnamurti, who's a lesser well-known guy, but an Indian philosopher who lived turn of the last century, is extremely influential to me. He's an uncompromising, very direct person who basically tells you to look at your own mind at all times. And so I've been hugely influenced by him. Probably the best book of his that I like is one called The Book of Life, which is sort of excerpts from his various speeches and books that are stitched together. Oddly enough, Bruce Lee wrote some great philosophy.
Definitely.
And Striking Thoughts is a book that is a good summary of some of his philosophy. But I could go on and on and on. I mean, you have to read hundreds of these things, literally. Blogs. The blogs are, I feel, an underappreciated resource. We're now in a day and age of Twitter and Facebook where we're getting sort of bite-sized, pithy wisdom that's really hard to absorb. And books are very difficult to read as a modern person, because we've been trained, we've got two contradictory pieces of training. One is our attention span has gone through the floor, because we're hit with so much information all the time that we want to summarize, skip. We want to get to the TLDR, cut to the chase, too long, didn't read. What's the 140 character version? What's the Instagram version? On the other hand, we're also taught from a young age that books are something you finish. Books are something that are sacred, that you treat books as when you go to school and you're assigned to read a book, you have to finish the book. So over time, we forget how to read books, or we get in this contradiction where everyone I know is stuck on some book. everyone is stuck on some books. I'm sure you're stuck on some book right now. It's like page 332. You can't go on any further, but you know you should finish the book. So what do? You give up reading books for a while. Your Kindle or your iPad or whatever you use, or even your paper book, is in a stuck state. And that for me was a tragedy, because I grew up on books, and then I switched to blogs, and then I switched to Twitter and Facebook, and then I realized I wasn't actually learning anything. I was just taking in little dopamine snacks all day long. I was getting my little 140 character burst of dopamine, and then I'd retweet, and then I'd see who retweeted my tweet, then I get into an argument on Twitter, and it's a fun, wonderful thing, but it's a game that I was playing. I wasn't actually learning anything.
Usually with Startup L. Jackson is
Startup L. Jackson, great character on Twitter. I realized I have to go back to reading books, because when you're talking about solving old problems, the older the problem, the older the solution. So if you're trying to learn how to drive a car or fly a plane, absolutely you should read something written in the modern age, because this problem was created in the modern age, the solution is created in the modern age. But if you're talking about an old problem, like how to generally keep your body healthy, how to stay calm and peaceful of mind, what kinds of value systems are good, how should you raise a family, these kinds of things, the older solutions are probably better. And they withstood the test of time. Any book that survived for 2,000 years has been filtered through a lot of people. Now, it may have some stuff in it that we now know to be true, but the general principles are more likely to be correct. So if I want to learn the theory of evolution, which I kind of use as my binding principle whenever I'm trying to explain any human action, people read all kinds of blog posts and tweets on evolution. Everyone has a loose understanding of how evolution works, but how many have actually read The Origin of the Species? I mean, you can get it for $5 on Kindle, and it's a very easy read. It's not a difficult read. And you can read the actual source, and you can see the source of the brilliance, and you can see how Darwin came up with stuff back then that we're still trying to figure out, or statements he made that we're still trying to prove out. But there's very little that's incorrect in that book, and it is a source book. So I wanted to get back into reading these source books. And I knew it was a very hard problem, because my brain had now been trained to spend time on Facebook and Twitter and these other bite-sized pieces. So what I did was I came up with this hack where I started treating books as throwaway blog posts or as bite-sized tweets or Facebook posts. And I felt no obligation to finish any book. So now, anytime someone mentions a book to me, I buy it. At any given time, I'm reading somewhere between 10 and 20 books. I'm flipping through them. So I'll skip. If the book is getting a little boring, I'll skip ahead. Sometimes I'll start reading a book in the middle because some paragraph caught my eye, and I'll just continue from there. And I feel no obligation whatsoever to finish the book. If at some point I decide the book is boring, or if it's got pieces of it that are incorrect, so now I can't trust the rest of the information in there, I just delete it. And I don't remember them at all. So I treat books now as other people might treat throwaway light pieces of information on the web, and all of a sudden books are back into my reading library. Right. And that's great, because there's a lot of ancient wisdom in there.